guess you can't say you lost something if you then found it. But for about 24 hours, it was lost. Even though I actually knew where it was the whole time, I did not have access to it because it was in another country. But we got it back.
That's good.
And we got a flight credit out of it.
Oh, nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
How was the hike up the mountain?
It was...
Which mountain was it?
The Nevado de Colima.
Mm-hmm.
So,
where's that in English?
Well, Colima is a place.
Oh, okay.
So it's it's a little over 14,000 feet. Someone's going to tell me I'm wrong. I think it's the tallest mountain in Mexico. It might be number 2. It's way up there.
How long does that take to summit?
Well, there's multiple routes. And we accidentally took the shortest route, which was also the toughest route, straight up the mountain.
Oh, 'cause it's so steep.
It was about a 60-degree incline. And it was either sand or snow. So you're sliding or slipping for a whole 2 miles. It took about 2.5 hours, which was actually kind of fast considering. But we ended up going up the cliff side of the mountain. So to get to the summit, we had to rock climb around to actually take a path up. And that's the way we had to go down. We couldn't go down the way we went up because we would have just basically fallen down the mountain.
Right. So you're literally rock climbing your way up parts of that?
I learned the difference between hiking and mountain climbing.
Yeah.
There's
a significant difference.
Yeah. And
I learned that.
I didn't have the proper gear for climbing. No one told my uncle, who's actually a mountaineer, like we had no safety gear. We didn't have enough water for more than like 4 hours. We didn't have a first aid kit, didn't have a flashlight because we planned on getting down before dark, which we did.
How are comms up there? Like, does your cell phone work? Like, or do you have to have a radio with you? Or
weirdly enough, no service until we were almost at the top of the mountain, and then I had cell phone service.
But even if something happened along the way, like, how would you have like called for help or something?
Oh yeah, I don't know. But I mean, it's in the middle of a national park. There were a lot of people at the base. It was only just at the top that there was maybe a handful.
So if you just yell really loud, someone will maybe hear you.
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
You could wave.
Hope it's a safety strategy. Not advised, but it does get.
No, I mean, I never felt like we were in danger, but I definitely realized that. So I sprained my ankle really bad rock climbing right before the pandemic. So what was that? Like
19.
The end of 2019, like Christmas.
Yeah.
It was indoors. I just fell in a weird way and my foot got stuck. My body kept going. And I rehabbed it, but it's never been the same. But I also never went back to rock climbing. And so I realized I all of a sudden was like, I thought I was going to have a panic attack. And I was like, oh, I didn't even think about this being an issue because I didn't know I was going to rock climb. And I didn't think I had any trauma around that. But that was probably when my heart was beating the hardest, despite the 2,000 foot elevation gain in like 1 mile.
Did you notice any difficulty in breathing as you got higher up the mountain?
I mean, a little bit, but we also went from sea level to 14,000 feet in 36 hours. Don't do that. I've never had a problem with elevation, so I kind of didn't think it would be a problem, but it was definitely a take 6 or 7 steps, take a
breath, right. And then do you find when you're going through...
I was also fighting a cold.
That's never fun.
There were a lot of poor decisions.
Yeah.
But it was so worth it. It was amazing.
Sometimes those are the best adventures.
Yeah.
The ones that are a little more ad hoc, where you just get up and go. Because in a real world situation, that's kind of how it's going to be thrown at you.
That's true.
You're not going to have a lot of time to plan for the adversity unless you had some kind of like, awareness that there was a possibility or something in some kind of like preparation phase. But when you are doing something that's, equally challenging and difficult with your partner, do you find you learn more about each other in those circumstances? What are some of the takeaways that you find? But I'll ask you this. After having done that climb with is it boyfriend, partner?
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to give it an official. Oh, this is getting serious now.
Such a weird word to use as adults, I think.
It is. It's so like sophomoric.
Yeah, but partner can mean so many different things. So it's like,
right.
Is it any better? Yeah. Anyway.
What did you learn about him, and what do you think he learned about you?
Well, I always have said that I think traveling together is something you should do if traveling is important to you, because you learn a lot about a person, because nothing ever goes right, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what if they lost their luggage at the beginning of the trip, or just your flights are delayed and you're sleeping in airports, or like nothing goes perfectly according to plan. Or if you're the type that doesn't make any plans, when the other person does like to make plans, that's always fun.
Yeah, traveling is definitely an education in experience, or an experience in education.
Yeah,
because you learn so much. Like one of the great benefits of my former career was that I got to travel all over the world, like 163 different countries, like 300 protective missions, and it's like that old quote, like the world is a book, and if you don't travel, you only live on one page. But I was always doing those trips in a professional capacity, so I never really got to experience those things with someone else, or at least, and if I did, it was like more of like a work team dynamic. It wasn't like an interpersonal connective dynamic.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm saving Hawaii for actually it's the one place in the world I've never been that I want to go and actually share that experience with someone. But I'm always curious when couples travel, how much is revealed in each of those.
Yeah.
Even if on an anecdotal level, but because you're right, because I think when people are, or I'll use I statements, I know that when I'm planning travel, the planning of the travel is almost more exciting than the travel itself.
Do you over-plan, though?
I don't over-plan, but I over-fantasize about how great it's going to be and how enjoyable it's going to be, and we're going to get to see this, and we're going to get to see that, I'm going to get to go do this, and I've always wanted to do X, Y, or Z, and I'm going to get to go do that, or I'm finally going to get to see the 8 wonders in the world, the seventh. Now I only have one left, and then you get there, and it's just like, the pyramids. Because it's not like Indiana Jones where you get to Giza and it's this. I remember leaving the hotel.
You mean you don't have a soundtrack playing at all times?
Right, or Morgan Freeman giving a voiceover narration. But I remember staying at the Sofitel in Egypt, and the car picked me up. They sent some state delegation sent a car to pick me up because we were going to do the tour that the delegation was going to do that was flying in 2 days. And in my head, we're in downtown Cairo, right? We're in a metropolis, and I'm thinking in my head that the pyramids are way off in the middle of nowhere, and I'm so how long do we have to get there? I'm got my journal out, I'm doing these things. She's like, 15 minutes, and he kind of points, they're right over there, and I'm like, what? And he's like, so when you see the postcards, you're only seeing it from one vantage point, and then you turn around, there's a Starbucks and a McDonald's 100 feet away, not 100 feet away, but you know what I'm saying. But to my earlier point, is traveling with your partner something that I guess it could go both ways, right? It could bring you together. Or it could kind of be oh, I see how they handle this kind of a thing. But what were some of the takeaways from?
Well, it's interesting because I'm a pretty relaxed traveler now. I've always been the type where I don't want to have a huge itinerary. I don't want to have all my hours of my day of my vacation planned out. I mean, I want to choose one major thing to do each day, and that's it. There has to be lots of downtime and also just time for spontaneity, right?
Right, because you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah. And I'm actually less of a planner than most of my friends I'm less of a doer, I would say, than most of them. They want to get up early and they want to do this and they want to do this. And then I'm I want to take a nap. I love naps. And I want to sleep in and have coffee and not talk to a person for at least 2 hours. That's every day, but especially on vacation.
That it's for.
And so it's interesting to see myself from that vantage point. And then now I'm with someone who is even less of a planner. He's the type that would just show up in a place and figure out where he's going to spend the night. Whereas I at least want to know I have a bed to sleep in. Every other part of the day can be random. We can figure it out in the moment. But I at least want to know that I have a place to sleep and a place to shower.
Right. Where's my coffee, my shower, and my bed?
And the coffee could be Nescafe. I have no problem with that. I'm not a snob about some things, most things, I think.
Is Nescafe the instant coffee?
Yes.
Okay.
Which, by the way, for some reason is always better in other countries. I would never drink it here.
Well, because here it's just like Folgers, right? Like,
yeah. But I mean, it's probably the same everywhere, but there's just something.
It's Nescafe.
It's Nescafe.
You put some French into it. Ooh la la.
So yeah, but like he's so much less of a planner. And
well, who planned this? Who planned this?
Who
planned this mountain climb?
Well, the original plan had been to do it last New Year's, and so the story is, I think it's pretty funny. It was a 2-week trip, mostly through Baja, beaches, La Paz, Todos Santos, swam with whale sharks, did some surfing, relaxing on the beach, wanted to climb this mountain. And I was okay with it, but I was just told we're gonna hike this mountain at sunrise. I'm like, okay, I know nothing about it. I didn't research it for a while. And because it didn't seem like it was that big of a deal. And so I'm thinking like, okay, 8,000 or 9,000 feet, regular mountain, whatever.
Yeah.
Because of course, not being from Mexico, I don't think of mountains in Mexico. I think of beaches, right? Well, the day before packing to leave for what is mostly a beach trip, keep that in mind, I find out that it is a 14er. I find out that it is below freezing, that we want to do it in the dark so that we're at the top at sunrise. Oh, and that we're camping.
So way to a woman's heart right there.
And I was just like, that's significant information that I need to plan.
Yeah, you're not doing that in flip-flops and a bikini.
Exactly. I'm like, that's different shoes. That's different outfits. I pack in a carry-on, so I have to be very efficient with my packing. We ended up not doing it just for the planning, and we were all very, very, very tired. So
also doing it in the dark, so you get there at sunrise is really...
And we did not have headlamps. The plan was to use our phones, those are legitimate flashlights, but let's be honest, when you're crawling up a 60-degree incline the whole time, you probably don't have free hands. So in retrospect, I'm glad that didn't happen. But all year, it was like, okay, next year, I really want to do this. So I had a little bit more information. I made us plan it a little better. Although the plan for the entire trip changed probably 5 times in the span of 3 days. Like, oh, we're going to go here first, and then the mountain. We're going to do the mountain first, and then go here.
Oh, so you had things like built into the itinerary on either side of the...
Mm-hmm. Because there was Christmas, because there was New Year's, like all of those things.
When did you actually... You went sometime between Christmas and New Year's?
New Year's Day.
New Year's Day. Oh, that's a fun adventure.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
And then was it worth it when you got to the top?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It was. I mean, we didn't spend very much time up there because it was cold and windy, and we needed to get down.
Was it snow-capped or no?
Yeah, there was a lot of snow. It hadn't been snowing, but there was old snow up there.
Is that... Oh, okay. I was going to say, is that like a snow-capped mountain year-round just because of the elevation?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's at least a little bit up there. So
yeah.
It's definitely worth it.
It's so funny when you can be like in like some, like I know in the Middle East especially, like you'll be at ground level and it's like 120 degrees and then you look up and there's like snow-capped mountains and you're like, it's just...
Yeah. It's kind of wild.
There's a dissonance there. You're like, how is this?
And so windy, which it wasn't windy at the base at all. So you're just like, oh, I feel like I'm in a completely different planet.
Well, yeah, because there's nothing blocking the wind from whipping around, the higher you go. Same thing when you get up into like when you're in New York and you go up some high rise 70 stories up and you just go out on a balcony, you just hear the wind just whipping around because
oh yeah,
on the ground, just so many chicanery for the wind to stop.
Yeah. And we were trying to be really mindful of like there was no rain in the forecast, but it had gotten cloudy, it was windy, and you don't want to be up there.
Yeah, you don't want to be climbing.
The weather changes so quickly.
Well, you don't want to be climbing wet rocks. Like it's so, and especially if you're not like on belay or if you're not like tied in or anchored in or if you don't have kind of like, any kind of like
our climb
safer
wasn't
precautions.
quite that technical, but we definitely had to rock climb a couple places.
Yeah.
So,
don't look down.
And then it took longer to get down than originally planned.
So what was the route you took down if you couldn't go down the way
it was the route that we had planned on going up, which was much longer. You kind of went around the mountain. So, which is probably less fun, a lot safer.
Almost like a slalom type course going down? Or was it just more of a gradual
all the way around?
Okay.
Versus we took the short route straight up.
Oh, so you went up like this, but then came down kind of like on
the other side.
Almost like a spiral.
Yeah.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Was there a lot of people out there?
There was a decent amount.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fun.
And definitely there were some kids that I was like just hiking in like their pajamas. And here I am complaining about my good trail shoes and my Patagonia jacket. I've got my Camelback on. Oh man.
Well, that was good.
But it was a lot of fun.
Any other notables from that trip?
Yeah, there was kind of a lot. Holidays are hard. I think there's a lot of emotions, highs and lows. And we're used to seeing all the highs in advertising and movies. It's all about love and family and good vibes. But there's like I knew 2 people that died. 1 2 days before Christmas, I was really close to. And actually, when we were in Mexico, the mother of someone we knew passed away, and it was expected. So we actually there was a funeral on New Year's Eve, and then there was a New Year's Eve party 3 hours later in a different place. So that was both strange and also kind of beautiful.
Yeah, it's very sort of like circle of life-ish.
Yeah.
How were holidays for you as a kid? Christmas, yeah.
Like when I was a kid, I remember we would always go to my grandparents. Both sets of grandparents live in Memphis, Tennessee at the time, but they're all from Kentucky. So we would all make the trek to Kentucky to my great aunt's house. There's easily 75 people in attendance. Yeah.
That's a lot.
That's a lot of people. Because I think everyone had 4 or 5 kids, starting from the great-grandparents down. So it's a lot of people. And, people didn't move as far away, especially in smaller towns in the South, conservative cultures, they tend to stay closer to home. So everyone was available. Now we've all moved away or people have died. Like we don't all get together like that. But those were so much fun. I loved them.
Yeah, my Christmases as a kid were always complicated.
Yeah.
It's like you're poor and it's like and you're told that like there's this like Christmas miracle that's going to come, but like it never really reaches expectation. Mm-hmm. And then I always felt like our Christmases were always geared towards making other people happy, right? Like we would wake up Christmas morning, we would do like our family thing, but then we never really got to enjoy it because then we had to go get ready because then we had to go see this side of the family's 4 stops, and then the other side of the family's like 5 stops, and it all had to culminate in like getting to like our grandparents' house where like everyone was happy to be there, but also like stressed in what it took to get there, and then no one was ever there on time, and we had to wait for these people to show up before we could start doing dinner, and it was just always this like high stress, like we have to do all this work to get to the thing so that we can all enjoy this thing together. Why can't you all just enjoy this thing now that we're all together? It was almost like a mandatory. It was like it was just always. I
remember feelings like that. And I grew up fairly poor too. And definitely my grandparents and great grandparents, I mean, we're talking like sharecroppers, coal miners. Yeah. But it's interesting that like I never felt poor at the holidays. I was acutely aware of it in other aspects of growing up. Because my dad was a little too, I almost want to say outspoken. I just think he put his anxiety and his scarcity mindset onto us as children. And I don't think that children are capable of or shouldn't have to take that on. So I was acutely aware that we had less, but not at the holidays, because our holidays were more about, at least when I was really young, was just being together as a family. And then when we moved to Texas, it became, well, I only see them at Christmas, not Thanksgiving and Christmas. Right. And then it was every other Christmas. So we start having our own tradition, because that's a good 16-hour drive. I get it. With 3 kids in winter, and you don't want to do it. No. I understand. But so we started losing that
the Texas to Kentucky haul isn't like, what are you doing this weekend? Driving to Kentucky.
With 3 children and a dog.
That's a Christmas Vacation movie in and of itself.
Oh man, I'm sure my mom has some stories. But
I was having a conversation with somebody the other day, just how travel just used to be so much different. So my grandparents had this beach house in Ocean City, New Jersey, and they lived in Pennsauken. And so sometimes we would go to my grandparents' house, and then my grandfather would drive. He had one of those big Oldsmobile station wagons, but they had 2 of them because my grandparents had 10 kids. And I was the first of 32 grandchildren or something. So, but my grandfather, this is so quintessential of how the 80s worked, was he did everything by beers. How long will it take to get there? Oh, 3 beers. 4 beers. Today, you would tell a kid, oh, 3 SpongeBobs or 2 Scooby-Doos. No, it was 3 beers. And he would have a cooler in the car and he'd be pulling out cans and cracking them open like it was nothing. And it was just a different time. It was the speed limit was 55 miles an hour. Cars were built like tanks. Mm-hmm. The toll was 35 cents. And I always remember he would pay for my grandmother's toll. Be I'm going to pay for you give the guy $1, get 15 cents back or something. And I'd be wow, this is adulthood.
Different times.
And but travel time was done in beers. So I can't imagine how big that cooler would have to be for a 16-hour drive.
We'll never know, because we don't drink, or didn't in that world. I didn't drink till I was 21.
Really?
Yeah, because the way I grew up, there's no alcohol, there's no drugs, there's no dancing, there's definitely no sex.
Yeah, no drugs. Sex was there, but not talked about. But alcohol, my family, Irish Italian. And their big thing was my grandparents were always very big on start drinking with family, because family's going to look after you. Mm-hmm. Know where your limit is, because that way when you go out into the world, you're not going to make an ass of yourself. You're not going to put yourself in a position where you don't want your first time being drunk to be at some college basement party where you're going to put yourself in a situation.
Yeah, that's the same logic. You can apply it to alcohol, you can apply it to sex, you can apply it to a lot of things. And I grew up in a culture that was just abstinence everything, and don't even I grew up in Texas, and it's bad now. It was really bad then too. Mm-hmm. And just culturally, in the church and in the South, you don't talk about sex. You definitely don't have it, and it's your lady parts do not exist, basically. So sex education didn't exist. So then you get out there and
safe sex meant the car door was locked.
Yeah. No, it's if you just pretend it doesn't exist, it won't exist. But that's not how it works.
So where did you go to school?
University?
Yeah.
I went to school actually in Illinois at a small school, Millikan University.
Millikan. But you were living in Texas when you...
Mm-hmm. We moved to Texas when I was 7.
Okay.
Against my will, which
they didn't
don't come at my parents, by the way. It's always against a 7-year-old's will.
Yeah.
But no, my mother will tell you this story, that I was furious the whole time. I was 7. I, had just had a best friend, and you're starting to create relationships, and then they take me away. And we were driving in a big green Oldsmobile. I remember it. It's forest green. And driving from Tennessee to Texas, and just being where are the trees? where are you taking me? And just furious. So I always wanted to get out. So I left as soon as I could.
Which was college.
Mm-hmm.
How did you pick that school?
Well, I went to school for music and business.
Really?
Mm-hmm. I wanted to be in the music industry.
Wait, so you played piano, or you still play piano. When did you start learning piano?
I taught myself to read music in the first grade.
You taught yourself to read music in the first grade?
Mm-hmm. My mom played piano. My
so like
dad,
treble clef, bass clef, like you had a working
my mom,
knowledge of
we
that.
had a piano, we had a bunch of music, and she got me and my older sister these just like beginning books where you like put the letter and you put it on the music staff.
Yeah.
But she didn't teach us anything. We had it and we both picked it up, but I was the one that was more invested in it than my older sister. So I taught myself how to read music, and then I literally just started like playing music on the piano.
Huh.
Elton John was the way I learned to play the piano.
Were you doing a lot by ear, or
No, not at all.
so
I cannot play by ear in improv at all.
But if it's written out, you can go, okay, this goes here, this goes there.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So then eventually,
I was the exact opposite. I couldn't read music for it.
it's usually one or the other. There are a few people that can do both, and it's incredible. Like I want to see what their brain looks like on imaging.
Yeah, because if you told, I'd be like, like they would like you had to go for these like, and I'm sure you've had to do this too. Whether it was like for like a competition or like a state competition, or if you're like trying to get into like the state jazz band or something like that, you had this audition process, and it'd be like, your tonality, your ability to read, your ability to improv, your ability to
sight reading is always the
sight
thing.
reading. They would always drop in front of me. I was like, don't know, like literally don't know. Now, if you tell me how it sounds, I can play it for you, no problem. But if you just want me to look at this, I'll be like, I don't know.
Yeah.
And then once I heard it, once I knew how it sounded, then I could at least read I could read the progressions, and I could read the spaces or the cadence or the crescendos or the decrescendos or the staccatos or what have you, to inform how I was going to interpret what I was playing. But I couldn't read to save my life. Still can't.
Yeah. So I learned, I think if I learned to read music in like the first grade, I was playing by third grade.
Did you learn any
But I was just playing on my own.
Any other instruments? Just piano?
Mm-mm. And I was in choir my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
And both my parents were in choir. My mom played the piano. She was also an artist. We did a lot of theater together. So, but yeah, I didn't start taking lessons. I convinced my parents because they never pushed us to do anything. They also wouldn't pay for anything. So I didn't get to start taking lessons until I was a sophomore in high school. I finally convinced them. And I had a really amazing teacher. She was wonderful. And she and her husband moved to Illinois, to Western Illinois University. And I went and auditioned there, and I got in. As a music major. As a music major. But they didn't give me that much scholarship money. And I did also get an academic scholarship because I was a business major too. But I was putting myself through school, so Millikan gave me a lot more money.
Oh, okay.
So I went there.
Then what were you going to do? What did you want to do with a music degree?
I wanted to be in the music industry because I've always, besides being a musician, that artistic component, I've always had like the accounting, linear, like business-minded brain.
Which I'm very thankful for.
Which also made my dad happy if I was going to get a business degree, because what are you going to do with a music degree? How are you going to make a living? So I wanted to be in the music industry until I actually interned in the music industry at the end of college and realized that
it's pretty seedy.
It's very toxic.
Yeah.
And not my actual internships. They were wonderful at Sony, BMG, and MTV, both in Chicago. They were great, but I saw enough that made me realize like, this isn't a feeling I like.
Yeah, that's a real get one over on the other guy.
Yeah.
environment.
Yeah. A lot of great people. I'm glad now looking back that I realized it that early, but at the same time I was graduating and was like, oh, okay, you just got 2 degrees and you have a bunch of student loans and now you don't want to do the thing that you did all of that for. Now what?
I kind of did something similar. I was like, I doubled psychology and sociology and then joined the army. I was like, okay.
Like,
So where did
But I've always been a hustler. I've had to take care of myself.
Right.
Like the moment I was old enough to get a job, I was working. I put myself through school. I bought my first car by myself. Like I've never had family to rely on financially, and at times emotionally. So.
And is that where you met your then husband?
Mm-hmm. We dated all through college, and we got married right after we graduated, which sounds really young, 22, but was actually...
It was kind of the norm back then, though.
And actually, I mean, I had multiple friends that got married in college.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Which I cannot imagine.
Are any of them still married?
Yes, actually.
Really?
Mm-hmm. I'm not super close with most of them, but yeah, the ones I know of, a lot of them are still married.
That's interesting. So I think statistically, like both parties in their 20s getting married for the first time, I think has like a high 80s divorce rate.
Oh, I'm sure.
Because, you're just completely different people.
But at the same time, I will say this, because now being almost 41 and trying to, build another marriage to last the rest of my life, and having dated, I think it is actually a lot easier to stay married when you're young.
Explain.
Because you are a lot more malleable. You don't quite know who you are. Mm-hmm. And if you're both in that position and you both grow, then you grow together. As we get older, we are so much more set in our ways.
Much more rigid.
Which is, that's what happens to the brain, right? It becomes more rigid and we're so much more set in our ways. As women, a lot of my friends, we're all single and we live alone, or have been for a while. And you get really good at doing everything on your own. And even though you say you want a partner and maybe you don't want to work full time anymore, maybe you want to be a stay-at-home mom, your habits and your actions don't actually invite that in. So then it actually becomes harder to bring in that partner that takes that on.
That's a very interesting concept that I would like to explore a little deeper with you. So in addition to the PTSD work I do, I also do some like group therapy work. And in some of those groups, this concept of like the divine masculine and the divine feminine kind of like come into play. Mm-hmm. So someone like yourself, right, who is 100% like in your feminine, but when you have to also...
that's debatable.
But when you also like have to be in your masculine because you're on your own, you're responsible for yourself, for your own protection, for your own provision, for everything. Mm-hmm. But then wanting to also say that you have a boyfriend, you have a partner that you two seem to be doing really well and working towards your those common interests and goals that the two of you have set for each other. But do you find it difficult to kind of move more out of your masculine and more into your feminine because so much of that masculine has been so much of your identity for so long?
Mm-hmm. I have conflicting feelings about the words masculine and feminine, and if you want to put divine in front of it, because it's hard for us to separate that from gender.
Yeah, I'm also not completely
right.
Sure
we also have to
understand
that like everyone has both inside of them.
100%.
It's not one or the other, and men aren't masculine, women aren't feminine, like in that kind of binary sense. So, putting that little asterisk there. I've been in survival mode most of my life, which is inherently masculine. Mm-hmm. If you are taking care of yourself, if you are the breadwinner, even when I was married, I was the breadwinner. I was actually taking on the duties at home and the duties outside the home, which is one of the reasons we didn't work because I very much resented that.
Right.
So I've always been not just the caretaker, but the provider for at least myself, if not myself and my family.
Were you doing accounting work then? What was your job?
I did a mixture of things. My first job out of college was a receptionist at a law firm downtown Chicago, which was the most boring job ever. But it gave
receptionist at a law firm?
But it gave me insurance.
Oh.
So at the time, I needed a full-time job and I needed insurance, or at least I thought I did.
Yeah.
Just to have something, right? After that, I got into retail management.
Okay.
Which was nice because I wasn't sitting at a desk at all, but it was also didn't pay that well. The hours aren't very good, but it had insurance.
Right.
So
where did your passion for like the fitness industry come in?
Well, I was a tennis player in high school.
Okay.
Was on the varsity tennis team until I got injured. And then in college, I just, this was the early 2000s. It wasn't the same culture, but I worked out. I went to the gym. I swam a couple of times a week, like a mile probably, just for fun, not competitively. Did that forever.
People say I'm swimming a mile like it's easy. It's not. Swimming a mile is hard.
I mean, it's not easy. It doesn't, but it's not, I don't think it's running a marathon either. It doesn't take as long.
It certainly doesn't take as long, but it might be as physically enduring.
I think that was actually my first introduction to meditation.
Swimming.
Mm-hmm. Because you have to be so aware of your breath and it's so even. And when you're in the water, you can't hear anything except yourself.
Yeah.
So
I haven't thought of that, but that's very true.
Yeah.
And it's not just focusing on the breathing, but it's the breathing in concert with the movement, right? So it's like stroke, turn, breathe, down, stroke, exhale, stroke, turn. I'm probably getting the cadence all wrong, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. And you're just looking down at this black line that's, in the pool.
Looking for that little T to do your flip.
Mm-hmm. So, I didn't know it at the time, but that was probably what meditation was for me, or that's why I liked it.
Mm-hmm.
I actually went to my first yoga class.
Was yoga a thing back then?
No.
Yeah.
I went to my first yoga class. Where was this? I guess I was living in Chicago when Bally's was still a thing.
Bally's used to have the best
Chicago
commercials.
With the indoor pool in the winter, it was awesome. But there, I went to a yoga class, and it was much more the old school teacher. Like she had this long curly hair that wasn't brushed very well, and she was probably in her 50s and talked very softly like this. But I went to yoga class because I hated stretching. And I was like, well, if I go to class, I will do it. Right? That's good logic.
Yeah.
And I liked it, but it didn't happen very often. So I never I didn't get hooked on it at all. I just kind of did it every once in a while because I knew it was good for me. And then fast forward to living in Austin, I had started doing Bikram yoga because it was like hot, sweaty yoga was a thing, but it was really only Bikram. And being an athlete, it was like, I want to work out, I want to sweat kind of thing. So that was all the rage. And which we don't want to go down that rabbit hole because Bikram is a terrible sequence. It's a terrible philosophy. He's a terrible human.
Don't hold back, tell us how you feel.
There's many, many documentaries on it.
I think there's a whole Netflix channel just dedicated to Bikram.
I mean, if you want to get into all the yoga gurus and how terrible they are, and wellness culture in general, that is a fun rabbit hole.
Oh, we'll get into that.
But yeah, so fast forward, living in Austin doing Bikram, and I had to move to New York. And so for my husband's job, well, he got a job finally. So I didn't want to move to New York, but we did.
Bit of a culture shock going from Austin, especially back then, to New York.
Yeah, this was 2009. And we lived in Brooklyn before it was quite what it is today.
Yeah, Brooklyn used to be.
I mean, Williamsburg had come up at that point.
Yeah.
But we lived in Bushwick when Bushwick was not what it is today.
Oh, no. I have family that live in Brooklyn. And, Brooklyn used to be like the Jay-Z like came up from the streets, like you were from Brooklyn.
Mm-hmm.
Now being from Brooklyn means like your dad owns a hedge fund.
Yeah. I mean, there's gentrification everywhere. So, but yeah, so when I was living there, I was really, and it's funny because I thought maybe I would like it because I love Chicago so much, except the winter.
Completely different.
And yeah, I quickly learned they're very different. The winter's not quite as bad, I will say that. But very few redeeming qualities for living there. It's a great place to visit. I would still go to this day for a few months.
I lived there for years. It was a blast.
But I could never live there again. And at the time, I started doing a Bikram yoga class, but it was really expensive. And I found yoga to the people or yoga for the people. I know it's defunct now because, again, yoga gurus and the seediness and the cults there. But anyway, so I found this and it was donation based. And so I was able to do it. It also happened to be on my subway route home. And yoga was the only thing that made me survive that year in New York. So I literally said, I told my husband, who we were already having so many issues, I said, I'm moving back to Austin and I'm going to become a yoga teacher. Basically, you can come if you want.
Did he come?
He did. Bless his heart. He wasn't ready to leave, but he came back with me and it still didn't work out. For a big part of that was because of yoga teaching, which sounds terrible, but that's when I really took ownership of what I wanted and started I was growing exponentially and he was not. And the divide that was already there just became a cavern.
Yeah. Ooh.
So, and by that point, we started going to therapy, which, was a bad word back then and still is in some cultures. But it was too little too late.
The damage was already done. The separation had already grown.
Yeah. And we fundamentally wanted different things in life.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
What do you see? So how long would you say you've been in the health, wellness, fitness?
14 years.
14 years. What do you see as the biggest shift in how that culture promotes itself or how that culture is perceived or how, because even when we were kids, there was the Jane Fonda workout things, right?
Sure.
There was Jazzercise. There was the who was the guy with the curly hair?
Richard Simmons.
Richard Simmons. So there's been this ever present fitness is important. Fitness in life. Fitness as a necessity for not just improving yourself but living a better life.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas now I think it's just it's almost like if you're not getting up and doing a cold plunge in a sauna and doing these 15 things, it's almost like, well, why even get out of bed if you're not going to do all these things, which I just think is ridiculous because I think, I don't know, but as someone who is inside the industry, who is a current health and wellness practitioner, what do you see as where do you think what do you think is going on with the fitness world right now? Is it overrated? Is it underrated? Is it
massively overrated? And also wellness culture is diet culture rebranded.
Interesting. I don't think I disagree, but say more.
If you look at, and I will say this,
fitness culture is diet culture rebranded.
Wellness culture, which fitness is part of that, is just diet culture that's been rebranded.
Okay. So this is the evolution of the food pyramid, right?
I mean, think about it.
You don't really need protein.
Think about it. You can't say it, it's out of fashion to say that I'm on a diet. So what do you say? I'm eating clean or I'm detoxing. But the goal is the same. The goal is to be smaller or fit into this aesthetic, Hopefully the smaller part goes away, but it's definitely coming back into fashion. But it's always to fit into this certain beauty aesthetic
That's interesting.
that we have deemed is acceptable.
Yeah. There's very few trainers or coaches or practitioners who I will say, on the one hand, it should be about how you feel, not like how you look. It should be about it should be almost more about function and capability and capacity rather than I'm a size 2, right? I think Kelly is really good about this. Like she's like, I used to be afraid of being seen as being strong, and now I champion it.
Yes. That conversation is much needed, and I hope it gets stronger. But at the same time, even people that are speaking that language and are doing good things, if they are, how do I say this? And this is not attacking any one person. This is attacking the industry and really the marketing around it. Most of the wellness world, most of the supplement world is the same, if not worse, than big pharma in my brain. Because you are creating a problem. You're telling people, hey, this is a problem that they never knew was a problem and probably isn't actually a problem, except for us super privileged Americans and other places in the Western world. But all of these, we create a problem and then we sell you the solution. But it's not really a solution because it doesn't solve the problem. Because if you solved the problem, you would no longer need these supplements.
Solution. Right.
So it is the same argument that we use against big pharma, just rebranded with different words because we think natural and clean is inherently better. And I'm not saying that there aren't natural solutions to things. Like there's a reason turmeric has been around for thousands of years.
Right.
So there are wonderful things. They have just been basically weaponized against us and marketed because it's all relying on consumption. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a $5 trillion industry.
Yeah, there's that. And I think there's also the Instagramification of fitness. Much as you see like the Instagramification of mental health.
Absolutely.
Where it's like people who have no credibility or who, they use the words and the language and the talking points of therapy without actually like being triggered is almost like good. Like it lets you know that like you have a
that word
disagreement
has
with
been
something.
used
But it's
so
like,
much
but you weren't actually
in so
triggered,
many ways that it actually doesn't mean anything anymore. And there's an actual term for that.
Or like the word trauma gets thrown around.
Yeah. That
wasn't traumatic. You just had your feelings hurt. Like,
yeah. And like not every experience you have creates trauma. It was just an experience.
Right. Someone disagreeing with you is not traumatic.
Yeah. I mean, I came up in the time when like social media wasn't a thing. I mean, and I didn't have Facebook until I was a senior in college. And even then it was really early. Like you had to have your university email.
Have like an EDU.
And there was a question about whether you'd get to keep it after you graduated kind of thing. And when I started teaching yoga, Instagram wasn't a thing other than like, really bad over-filtered pictures of your meal or some sunset.
I was in Jordan filming Zero Dark 30 when one of the producers or something was like, oh, have you heard this Instagram thing? And it was because they were taking a photo and then there was like some kind of like filter app where you could like make it look vintage or make it look like it was from a movie reel or like a Kodak thing. And then that would get uploaded to like Instagram. And Instagram was kind of like a digital postcard was the way they were kind of promoting it. So you don't have to send people a postcard. You can just put a postcard on your grid.
Yeah, it was much more like your memories versus your marketing of yourself.
Right. Yeah.
So then
it was like if there was Facebook, but it was just the photo. No comments, no photos. I don't even think you could comment it. I think you could maybe tag where you were.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember, but it was very. Because I remember my very first post was like I walked past one that said like peace starts here, and I was like, oh, that's cool. I'll take a photo of that, and that was like my first Instagram post, in like 2012, 2011, whenever it was.
I'll have to. I don't know if I can look back and see what my very first one was, but I mean, we can really get into some stuff, but we had Instagram, and most of us had it as private. Or maybe not all of us, but because it wasn't a marketing tool, mine was private. I was in a relationship who wanted my Instagram to be private. So there was no concept of like trying to grow your Instagram.
No, it was like a big thing when like Ashton Kutcher hit like 1 million followers. They were like, wow, like why would he have 1 million followers? Like
the main way that you started to see yoga teachers, like if you hit it big, if you were an influencer, so to speak, was to be a Lululemon ambassador. And you had like your picture up in the store. And back then you had to apply and, there's all of these things. Now they just choose whoever they want. It's just, who's popular basically.
Yeah, now it's a next top model competition.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing is you have to be attractive to be on a big poster in a store wearing next to nothing.
Yeah.
Even if you're wearing pants, they're skin tight. Almost all their tops are cropped. I'm like, can someone please give me a full length shirt? Like, also, like I'm almost 41. I'm teaching yoga. I want to be seen as a professional, especially because I work privately with people. And I work in such a way that I want them to see me more on the certified medical, like rehab setting.
Right.
I need to desexualize myself. So I can't wear low-cut aloe tops because no one needs to see that when I'm demoing a chaturanga.
Right. That's an interesting.
But other teachers use that to their advantage to gain a following and gain sponsorships. And I'm not speaking against them at all. It's just not a demographic that I want to compete against.
Do you find that being a woman who is approaching 40, 41 in the fitness industry versus like the 23, 22, 24-year-olds who are coming into the industry. Like if you're 23 and a fitness trainer and you don't have like washboard abs, there's probably something like you're doing something wrong because it's kind of like a bald barber. Like, what are you doing? But then I would also imagine that there's quite a drop off, of those people. So when someone like yourself or your what I would call your peers in the industry, do you see these like younger, more social savvy, but not really don't really have the industry experience or insight or knowledge, the training, the background, the experience? They just kind of look hot. Are you in competition with them, or are you so far ahead of the curve in terms of actually knowing what you're doing, actually knowing what works, actually knowing what your clients need?
I would say we're not. Well, years ago, I did think that I was in competition, which is natural because, we are teaching classes in the same places. We do have similar students. And then thankfully, I can't think of exactly when, but I learned that not only am I not in competition with them, I'm not playing the same game. Like I taught a class of 650 people one time. This was like, I think 2015 here in Austin. I regularly teach full classes at Equinox and places all over town in the last 14 years, but that's not my goal. I am not out here trying to be the most popular teacher. I don't want you coming to me because my music is good or because I make you feel good. I want you coming to me because you want to learn something. And also have a good time and listen to good music because I like those things, but I'm always going to challenge you and make you pay attention and make you learn. And not everyone wants that. And that's fine. Go to a different class. But I have found my way, and my people have found me, the ones that get hooked and want to learn and want to deepen their practice. Oh, I can't believe I actually just said that phrase. Anyway, I hate it, but it is true. Like the ones that want to go deeper, that want to learn something, and that have an issue in their bodies that they haven't had anyone else address, that maybe I can direct them where they need to go. Either because I might be able to help them, or I know people who can help them. So I'm playing that game, which is why I'm working inside a rehab clinic, which is why I'm working with professional athletes. I'm not worried about 22-year-olds who are doing what's popular.
What advice would you give to someone who is early 20s, who's getting into the health and wellness industry? Like, what advice would you give to them for having a career of longevity and of success to really do the 20-year journey?
Mm.
Without, or like, what are some of the pitfalls that they should look out for in terms of?
I think the thing that benefited me the most, I will say, in some ways it's harder now because I had the benefit of seeing the industry in a different place and coming from a wildly different background versus someone who, say, starts teaching when they're 20 or 21, grew up with social media, grew up with all these influencers. But at the same time, the benefit of that is there's so much information out there. So
in terms of like resources and people you can call on and learn and
like how many people you can learn from online these days, like it's wild. You know, we were having to actually travel across the country and spend 2 to 3 weeks and all of that money and not work. That was the only way to do it. And you can still do that now if you want to, but it's possible now to not have those constraints. There's so much information out there. Just keep learning. And learn from a variety of sources. You know, I study with people that are not yogis. They're gymnasts, they're PTs, they're athletes, just because everyone's going to look at the body and movement through a different lens. So learn what you can from all these different sources and then just put it into practice. And practice.
Yeah, one of the things I see...
Because I don't teach the way I did when I started. I can't imagine teaching or practicing the way I did 14 years ago.
Oh, no. I mean, I would think it would have to be like
thank
a natural...
goodness.
Yeah, I mean, right. I mean, every day's a school day. You're going to hopefully evolve and grow in how you're doing things.
Yeah.
One of the things that I see more in like the...
But I don't think that there's any way to get there without time and practice. Like it's that 10,000 hours.
Yeah.
There's no substitute. You cannot fast track that.
I also see some aspects of like the veteran community and the safety community, like the security side of my world, where they focus more on like growing their audience than on growing their capability.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? They're going to do the sexy range, cool, tactical, look at me, you know, making a fire, or whatever they're doing. But like they're not improving their skill set. They're not getting better as a teacher. They're not getting better as a communicator. They're not establishing themselves as a subject matter expert in a particular field. And if like, God forbid, something actually happened, like you would go back and look at all of their stuff and be like, yeah, this is why this happened, because you were teaching them all of this like faulty stuff.
Yeah.
Like I was working on one case where, you know, there was a security guard that was involved in a violent incident, and you go back and look at his social media, and it was almost like he was like waiting for that violent incident to like happen so he could like prove how good he would be at handling it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But was doing it in the most inappropriate and unsafe way possible in the promotion, which is exactly what happened when the incident arose. It's like, yeah, you were. So it's almost like what you're promoting can almost be used against you if you're not growing it in the right way. And I think a lot of people are in all industries are a little too social media obsessed. They're focusing a little too much on the social media and how they're being perceived than what they're actually able to perform. And I think when you like in just talking to you and other people like in the health and wellness and fitness industry, is that when they see someone who's like promoting themselves as this like subject matter expert, and then they actually get put in front of someone who they actually have to teach that one-on-one, they can't do it. They just don't have the capability. And I think that's one of the things that Kelly always champions, is that like she's really one of the reasons that she continues and has always continued to do the in-person training is that it informs her curriculum for the online content or
absolutely
for LAT or whatever.
I also think that one thing, if you want to become a better teacher of whatever subject, or even just become a better expert on your subject, is teach a beginner. Because just using the yoga industry, teacher trainings as an example, but you can apply it to many. In yoga teacher training, most of the people you're in training with are already yoga practitioners, and they tend to be very able-bodied. You're in shape, probably in your 20s, maybe early 30s. Speaking very, very generally, obviously. So you learn to teach people that already know what they're doing and can do those things. Go teach. I had a client for about 8 years who was 75 and blind and going deaf also. And teaching him was probably the biggest lesson I've ever had to learn, because it's one thing to just close your eyes and try to practice yourself, but you don't have that proprioception. Like, I know where I am right now because I saw it a few minutes ago. But as someone who hasn't seen it in 60 years because he went blind in college, like, you learn how to be very specific. You learn where we get lazy with our language. And also when something doesn't work, what do you do instead? And if you're used to people that can always do a plank, and maybe you make, like come off your wrists, but it's like, what if they can't do that either? What if they can't get on the ground? What if they can't stand up from being on the ground? Like, you learn, you start getting all these tools in your toolbox and really start playing and figuring it out.
That's fascinating.
And it was so much fun. I mean, he taught me more, not just about that, but like, about history and journalism. And we talked about books and AM radios and all these things. But yeah, if you really want to get good at teaching something, go teach an absolute beginner.
I love that. Lauren, I wrap up every podcast interview with 5 questions. So 5 questions for you. If you weren't doing what you're doing right now, like a parallel universe sliding doors moment, what would you be doing?
Okay, completely different. So we're going to ixnay anything in the wellness and the fitness world, just for the sake of the question. I would be living in a small house on the beach with a giant garden. That's basically what I do. I want to work in a garden and surf and swim and cook.
Love it. Number 2, what is something that you have always believed to be true that you have recently changed your mind about?
That my mother didn't like me.
You lived your whole life thinking that she didn't, and now you realize that she did? Or you lived your whole life thinking that she did like you, and now you realize that she didn't?
I grew up most of my, I'll try to be very succinct in the story, but I grew up in a super conservative Christian culture in the South. Women are very stoic in my family and in the culture in general. Not super affectionate, not super outwardly emotional. So I learned that from generations of women. And then on top of that, my dad kind of preferred me. I'm the middle child. Probably because I was a people pleaser. That's why he preferred me. But my mom, I felt like she preferred my older sister and like did everything for her, was there for her. And I was so mad about it for years. I was always closer with my dad than my mom. And then it switched when I became an adult. And not even just an adult, but like probably late 20s, early 30s. I started to realize, and I talked to my mother about this, which is a whole thing if you want to think about seeing your parents as humans versus your parents. That's a big realization. But I realized that she seemed to prefer my older sister simply because my sister needed more support. I was the one that was capable and I could take care of myself. And I was mad at her for almost 30 years. And like now my mom and I talk all the time.
What was the shift?
Therapy. Therapy, and I think just maturity and also just having those conversations.
Yeah.
I changed a lot. And again, I saw her as an adult, as a human, versus just my mom. So, yeah.
Yeah, and she was probably like in her 20s, like early 30s, right? Like,
yeah,
so
she had 3 kids by the time she was, I think, 27, and in a culture that she also didn't agree with. Mm-hmm. She was trying to constrain herself to fit in a box. So, yeah.
What is something you're grateful for?
Oh, man. A lot of things. But this morning specifically, I was grateful for the sunshine. So I took a walk with my dog.
It was a beautiful morning.
It was cold, but the sun just felt extra wonderful.
Yeah. The last 2 days have been weird like that. It's like really warm in the sun, but it's still kind of cold.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I'm just a houseplant.
This one's a fun one. Aliens, fact or fiction?
Oh, they have to be a fact.
Okay.
Because I think it would be very presumptuous and very borderline insane to think that we are the only intelligent life in a universe this big.
I agree. But like, have we made contact with it?
Oh, that's a different question.
It is a different question, but it's usually people go yes, and they're at Area 51.
4A and 4B. Right. Yeah, I don't know. I definitely think it's plausible. It wouldn't surprise me.
Oh, I definitely think it's possible. I just, on the probable side, I'm not so sure. I think a lot of the stuff we see is us. You know what I mean? Just tech we haven't released yet. Like drones we were using in Afghanistan, that were like top secret classified stuff. Like you can now buy in like Target. Mm-hmm. Last question. What do you think happens when we die?
Oh, well, energy can't ever be destroyed. It's only transformed, right? Mm-hmm. It's like glitter.
You can throw glitter out, though.
No, in like a year, you're going to find glitter in something.
You're still going to find it, yeah.
Like probably in this book, there's a piece of glitter and you're like, what? Where did that come from? So I think we're transformed just on a physical level. We turn back into the earth. And I don't know, I think I believe in reincarnation in some way. I don't know if I have concrete beliefs around it, but I definitely think that there's something afterwards.
I hope so.
It's a continuous process.
Yeah, I can't believe that this would just be it.
But thankfully, we don't actually know.
Because would you want to know?
I think that
I wouldn't want to know.
No, and I think that our brains, I don't think they could handle it. If we had that certainty, we would just find something else to be uncertain about and create stories around.
Yeah, that's very true. If people want to learn more about you or follow you, where's the best place for them to do so?
Oh, probably the good old Instagram.
Good old Instagram.
It's Lauren,
what's your handle?
Lauren Elizabeth B, as in Brown. I do put things out on YouTube. That's mainly it right now.
We can link both of those in the show notes.
Yeah.
Anything else you would like to promote or put out into the world?
No, I think we got into quite a bit.
We did indeed. Thank you so much. This was a lot of fun.
Thanks. This was great.
Cheers.